I'll never forget the moment I saw that bill. It wasn't the number on it that burned my chest like acid. It was the name written at the bottom, a name I knew too well, a name that should have never been there. Up until that night, I still believed her excuses. I still clung to the idea that networking dinners were exactly what she said they were. Work events, harmless meetings with potential clients, just business. She looked me dead in the eyes each time and swore it was all professional. And like a fool in love, I believed her. But then the waiter laid that folded piece of paper on the table in front of me, and my entire world shifted. My heart sank, my throat closed, and my hands went cold. Her name, on a receipt. A receipt from a dinner I wasn't supposed to see. At first glance, it just looked like a normal restaurant bill. 2 entrees, 3 glasses of wine, dessert. Nothing crazy, but the devil is always in the details. That dinner wasn't with me, and she sure as hell wasn't paying for it herself. The man's card was used. His name was right there on the bottom of the slip, and suddenly every excuse she'd ever given me came flooding back into my brain like knives. The late-night networking, the battery dying, I'll explain later, but trust me. All those tiny little red flags I had ignored because I wanted to believe her, because I loved her, stood up screaming at once. I sat there staring at that paper while the restaurant buzzed around me, forks clinking, glasses tapping, laughter echoing off the walls. My fiancée was across town, at work, and here I was, staring at proof she was dining with another man. And the worst part? I knew exactly who he was. I should have stormed out right then. I should have called her, confronted her, demanded answers. But instead, I did something else. I smiled. I tucked that receipt carefully into my jacket pocket like it was gold, because I realized something in that moment. She had no idea I knew. And that meant the game had just begun. But before I tell you how I used that receipt to unravel everything, let me rewind. Let me take you back to where it all began, when life felt normal, when she was still the woman I thought I was going to marry. Because the truth is, the red flags were always there. I just refused to see them. When people ask me what my life was like before everything went to hell, I usually say one word: comfortable. Not perfect, not flashy, just comfortable. I had a decent job, a small circle of friends, and a fiancée who I thought was the center of my world. Her name was Rachel. And if you had asked me 2 years ago, I would have sworn she was the one. The way she laughed at my dumb jokes, the way she could brighten up a room without even trying. She had that kind of charm. Everyone loved her. My parents adored her. My friends would nudge me and say, "Man, don't screw this one up. She's a keeper." We met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. Nothing dramatic, no slow-motion movie moment. She just sat across from me, wearing this red dress that made her look like she owned the room. And when she smiled at me, I swear I forgot what I was even talking about mid-sentence. Fast forward a year and a half later, we were living together in a small apartment downtown. Rent was high, sure, but she insisted being closer to where things were happening was good for both of us. She worked in marketing, the kind of job where late nights and networking events were apparently part of the package. At first, I didn't think twice about it. I was proud of her, actually. She was ambitious, career-driven, and way more socially smooth than I ever could be. While I was the kind of guy who would rather spend a Friday night watching Netflix or tinkering on side projects, she was the life of every party. If anyone could network, it was Rachel. But that's where the first little cracks showed up. Like the first time she came home at 2 a.m., heels in her hand, mascara smudged under her eyes. She kissed me on the cheek, mumbled something about meeting potential clients, and collapsed into bed. I remember lying there staring at the ceiling, wondering, since when do clients want to meet at midnight? I pushed it aside. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe this was just how her industry worked. After all, marketing was all about relationships, right? The second red flag came a month later. She started being glued to her phone. Now, I'm not the jealous type. I wasn't the guy who needed to check her messages or hover over her shoulder. But the way she'd tilt the screen away from me, The way she'd suddenly laugh and then lock the phone, it didn't sit right. "Who's that?" I asked casually one evening while we were cooking dinner. She smiled, kissed me quickly on the cheek and said, "Just work stuff. Don't worry about it." And I didn't. At least I tried not to. Then there was the wardrobe change. Rachel was always stylish, don't get me wrong, but suddenly she was buying dresses that screamed date night more than business casual. Her perfume got stronger, her makeup more deliberate. "You're really going all out these days," I teased her once, watching her put on lipstick before heading out to what she claimed was a networking dinner. She laughed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "First impressions matter, babe. You never know who could turn into a client." I smiled, but inside, something felt off. Still, I told myself I was being paranoid. That's the funny thing about love. It makes you argue with your own instincts. You know something is wrong, but you convince yourself it's nothing because the alternative, accepting the truth, is unbearable. We got engaged 6 months before the Bill incident. I had saved up, bought a ring, and proposed during a weekend trip by the beach. She cried, hugged me, said yes. It felt like one of those movie moments where everything lines up. But even in that perfect moment, there was something in the back of my head, something whispering, "You don't fully know her. She keeps things from you." Of course, I buried that thought. Everyone has secrets, right? Nobody shares everything. And besides, we were planning a wedding, building a future. Who was I to ruin it with doubts? But then the lies started stacking. Tiny ones at first. She said she was working late, but I drove by her office once and the lights were off. She said her phone had died, but her friend's Instagram story showed her at a bar, drink in hand. I wanted to confront her, but every time I tried, she would twist it. She'd look hurt, offended even. "Do you really not trust me? After everything," she'd say, her voice breaking just enough to make me feel guilty. And I'd back down, every time, because that's what manipulators do. They make you question yourself instead of them. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. The long nights, the secretive texts, the way she'd suddenly shower me with affection after disappearing for hours, as if love bombing could erase the suspicion in my chest. But back then, I told myself what every betrayed partner tells themselves. She wouldn't do that to me. Not her, not us. Oh, how wrong I was. But the real proof didn't come from lipstick stains or late-night texts or whispered phone calls. No, it came from something much simpler. A piece of paper, a restaurant bill that changed everything. The night I found that receipt wasn't the first time doubt had crept into my chest. If I'm being honest, the suspicion had been building for months. The problem was, every time I thought about it, I buried it under excuses. Love makes you do that. It forces you to rewrite reality so you don't have to face the ugly truth. But after that bill, I couldn't bury anything anymore. Something inside me switched. I didn't confront her right away. I didn't scream or accuse. I just watched, quietly, carefully. Because if she could lie so easily to my face, I needed more than just a gut feeling or one slip of paper. I needed undeniable proof. The first thing I noticed was her schedule. She'd always been busy, but suddenly she was working late, 3 or 4 nights a week. When I asked her what projects she was handling, her answers were vague. A campaign, she'd say, or new client onboarding. Always just enough to sound believable, but never with details. I started writing down the dates and times in a little notebook I kept in my drawer. If she said she was working until midnight on the 12th, I wrote it down. If she came home at 2 a.m. on the 17th, I logged that too. I didn't even know why I was doing it at first. Maybe part of me was already preparing a case file. One night, she told me she was going out for a last-minute dinner with a potential investor. I nodded, kissed her on the forehead, and told her to be safe. As soon as she left, I grabbed my jacket and followed her. I felt like a criminal sneaking around, but my pulse was racing with a strange mix of anger and adrenaline. I stayed a few cars behind, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight they hurt. She didn't drive to her office. She didn't go to some high-end hotel conference room. She went to a cozy Italian place downtown. And when she stepped inside, she wasn't alone. A man in a navy suit was waiting for her at the entrance. He kissed her cheek like it was the most natural thing in the world, and they walked in together. I sat in my car across the street, staring through the window like a ghost watching two people who had no idea they were being haunted. My fiancé was laughing, sipping wine, leaning closer to him with every passing minute, and I just sat there. I could have stormed in, flipped the table, caused a scene, but I didn't. I stayed quiet, my chest on fire, my mind recording every detail. When she came home that night, I played dumb. I asked her how dinner went, and she told me about a potential investor from Chicago who might bring big opportunities. Her eyes sparkled as she lied, and I nodded, pretending to believe her. Inside, I was dying. That's when I started digging deeper. I checked our shared credit card statements. At first, nothing stood out. Small purchases, gas, groceries. But then I noticed her personal card had way more restaurant charges than usual. Places I'd never been with her. A sushi bar on a Wednesday, a steakhouse on a Monday night, a rooftop lounge on a Thursday. She always had a ready excuse when I asked. Company dinners, networking mixers, client meetings. But the pattern was too obvious. I even went as far as calling her office once, pretending to be someone else. It was 9 p.m., and she had told me she'd be working late. The receptionist answered, confused. "Oh, Rachel left hours ago," she said. My stomach dropped. I started losing sleep. Nights were spent staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell I was doing with my life. I still loved her. I hated that I did, but I couldn't switch it off. Part of me hoped there was some reasonable explanation, some story that would make it all make sense. But the other part, the colder part, knew the truth was uglier. One Saturday while she was in the shower, I checked her phone. I know, an invasion of privacy. But at that point, I needed to know. Most of her messages were deleted, but one thread caught my eye. A single text left behind, maybe by accident. It read, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." No name, just a number. But that was all it took. My chest felt like it had caved in. When she came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, she looked at me and smiled like nothing was wrong. I smiled back, pretending. My whole body was buzzing with rage and heartbreak, but my face stayed calm. I realized then that anger wouldn't win this game. Patience would. So I became an actor. I laughed when she cracked jokes. I held her hand in public. I told her I loved her before bed. And all the while I kept collecting pieces of the puzzle. There was another night when I overheard her on the phone in the living room. She thought I was asleep, but I caught her whispering. Her voice was soft, playful in a way she never sounded with me anymore. I couldn't hear the words, but the tone said enough. I lay in bed, fists clenched, biting my lip until it almost bled, forcing myself not to get up and shout. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe all these late nights and phone calls really were business. Maybe that text was innocent, taken out of context. But then I'd see her come home with her lipstick smudged, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine, and the doubt vanished. The worst part was the dual life I had to live. On the outside, I was still the loyal fiancé, planning our wedding, smiling for family photos. On the inside, I was rotting. I wanted to scream every time she touched me. But I swallowed it, because I knew that if I waited, if I kept gathering evidence, the day would come when the mask would fall off her face for good. And as much as it hurt, a dark part of me wanted to see that day, wanted to watch her crumble under the weight of her own lies. I didn't know how it would happen yet. I didn't know when, but I knew it was coming. Because lies have a way of unraveling on their own, and hers were starting to slip, thread by thread. I spent the next few days moving like a shadow through my own life. I laughed when she laughed, cooked dinner the way she liked it, kissed her forehead when she was exhausted from meetings, and all the while I mapped out a plan. If this was going to end, it wasn't going to end with a screaming match in our kitchen. It was going to end clean, undeniable, and on my terms. The man from the restaurant? His name was Tom Calloway. I'd seen him before, twice actually. Once at a charity event where Rachel introduced him as a mentor, he knows everyone. And once on a Tuesday morning when he picked her up outside our building because the office carpool was full. He had that practiced charisma people in sales and marketing get good at. White teeth, easy laugh, expensive watch that caught the light like a lure. He looked like the kind of guy who had never heard the word no without a smile attached. I didn't want to be the guy who stalked his fiancée or played secret agent. But I've learned something about betrayal. It forces you to become a person you don't recognize. Not forever, just long enough to survive it. The first piece of the plan was information. I found a private investigator through a friend at work, someone quiet and old school who didn't ask for drama, just details. I told him the nights she typically worked late, the restaurants I'd noticed on her statements, the general pattern. He didn't blink. "Give me a week," he said. "You'll have what you need." While he did his thing, I started doing mine. I went to the Italian place where I'd seen them, asked for the manager, and told him a harmless version of the truth. There had been a mix-up with a bill, and I wanted to confirm a date for my records. He shrugged and scrolled through his system. People are always willing to help if you look tired and polite enough. There it was, a table for two under Tom's last name, billed to his corporate card, itemized down to the dessert. I didn't take anything, didn't photograph anything. I just nodded, thanked him, and walked out with the date burned into my memory. The nights got longer. Rachel's showers got longer too, and her perfume got louder. She started wearing a new necklace I hadn't seen before, thin gold with a small heart-shaped charm. "Gift from the team," she said when I asked. "We hit a milestone." The lie slid out like a silk ribbon. I smiled, put the kettle on, and wondered if the team wore navy suits and said her name like a promise. I made copies of important documents, leases, bank statements, receipts, without making a production of it. There's a difference between a breakup and a demolition. I wanted the former. I put a small duffel in the trunk of my car with a change of clothes and my passport. I wasn't planning to flee the country. I just wanted to feel the way a seatbelt feels when it clicks into place. Safe. And I practiced, not in a mirror. That felt too theatrical. I practiced in my head, lying awake while she breathed beside me. I practiced the moment I would say her name and watch her face. I practiced the way I'd put the evidence down, the pauses between my words. You don't realize how much timing matters until you plan to disarm a lie. Too fast and it feels like an attack. Too slow and the liar wriggles into your silence. Twice I almost broke. The first time we were at brunch with friends and someone asked about the wedding venue. Rachel lit up, talking about floral arches and a live band and a surprise she was planning for me. She squeezed my hand. I felt my throat tighten so fast I had to take a sip of water to keep from choking on my own disgust. I nearly said, "Is Tom invited?" But I swallowed the line like a fishbone and smiled at the table like nothing was wrong. The second time she came home late and sat on the edge of the bed to take off her heels. She sighed, let her head fall back, then turned and looked at me through her lashes. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm tired, I told her, and I was. Tired of pretending, tired of smelling someone else's cologne on the woman I loved. She slid under the covers and put her head on my chest like she always used to. For a few minutes, I almost believed nothing had changed. My hand moved to her hair out of habit, and something in me cracked in a quiet, private way. I didn't sleep that night. I counted the beats of her breathing and wondered if I would ever be able to forget the sound. The PI called me on a Thursday. His voice was flat, but the words shook the floor under me. "I've got photos," he said, "and some video. Hotel garage, Tuesday night. They didn't see me." He paused. "There's another thing. You might want to sit down." I was already sitting. He told me Tom wasn't just a mentor or a client. He was married. And not only married, his wife, Lydia, had been the person who hired him last winter for a nonprofit project. That's how Rachel met Tom in the first place, through Lydia's introductions. He knows everyone charm. The whole thing made my skin crawl. It wasn't just a betrayal of me anymore. It was a betrayal exported like a product, packaged and sold to the nearest willing ego. "Do you want me to contact the wife?" the PI asked. I thought about it. I thought about Lydia looking at Rachel the way my mother looked at her, like she was good for the world. No, I said, I'll do it. I found Lydia on social media. She had a quiet profile, a few photos of her team, a garden, a dog with a lopsided ear. I drafted a message 3 times before I sent it. I kept it simple, careful. I told her I didn't want to hurt her, that I had reason to believe our partners were involved. I said I had evidence if she wanted to see it, and that I would respect her wishes if she never wanted to hear from me again. She replied that evening. I had a feeling, she wrote. Come by tomorrow. Noon. Our house. She sent an address in a neighborhood where sidewalks are the color of money. I didn't sleep that night either. The next morning I told Rachel I was meeting a client for lunch. She kissed me, asked me to pick up coffee beans on the way home, and walked back to the bathroom humming. I stood there in the hallway for a second, looking at the life we decorated together. Then I left. Lydia opened the door with the dog barking softly at her ankles. She was smaller than I expected, with a composure that felt like steel wrapped in silk. We sat at her kitchen table with tea neither of us touched. I laid out what I had: dates, places, patterns. The PI's photos showed Rachel and Tom in the hotel garage, their hands on each other the way hands only go when people think they found a hidden corner of the world. Lydia didn't cry. She didn't rage. She looked at the photos for a long time, and then exhaled like a diver coming up from deep water. I'm not surprised, she said, and her voice didn't shake. I'm just done being treated like I am. She met my eyes. What do you want to do? The question hovered between us like a third person. What did I want? I wanted to rewind time. I wanted to not know. I wanted to burn everything down and also to hold Rachel the way I used to. The truth was simpler than all of that. I wanted the pretending to end. I want to confront them, I said. Not in a scene on a sidewalk, somewhere they feel comfortable lying. Lydia tilted her head. She understood immediately. The restaurant? I nodded. The same one. A private room. We planned quietly, like people planning a small wedding they no longer believed in. I booked the room and asked the manager, an older man with the politeness of someone who has witnessed every possible disaster with a smile, to have 2 bottles of the wine Tom always ordered waiting on the table. Lydia said she would handle getting Tom there. She'd text him that she was out with friends and would swing by after. If he asked why, she'd lie. It felt grimly poetic. Getting Rachel there would be easier and harder. Easier because she wanted excuses to dress up and leave the house. Harder because it meant sitting across from her for a day as if I wasn't winding the clock on our life. I sent her a message from my phone. Around noon? Dinner tonight? Want to celebrate us? Same place as your networking last week. 7 p.m. I watched the typing dots blink, then vanish. She replied, "Aw, babe, of course, can't wait." A heart, a champagne emoji. Something in me twisted at how quickly she could switch masks. The hours crawled. I went home after work, showered, put on the suit I had worn the night I proposed. The irony made my stomach churn. Rachel came out of the bedroom in a dress I had never seen. Deep green, cut a little lower than before, like she was trying to impress a future she hadn't earned. "You look gorgeous," I said, and meant it in a way that hurt. In the car, she played with the heart necklace. "You're quiet," she said again. "Thinking about the band," I lied. "The set list." She laughed and started talking about first dance songs. I let her voice fill the space because silence felt too honest. At the restaurant, the host smiled like he knew the ending to a play we hadn't reached yet. "Right this way," he said, and led us to a small private room at the back. The lights were warm, the table perfectly set, the wine already breathing like a living thing. For a few minutes, we pretended to be a normal couple having a normal dinner. We ordered appetizers we didn't touch. We made lazy jokes. I watched her eyes flick toward the door twice, the way a person glances for a bus they're not supposed to be waiting for. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Lydia. "We're here, 2 minutes." I set my napkin down, folded and neat. My hands were steady. "Rach," I said softly. She looked up, smiling. "Yeah?" "I invited someone to join us." The smile faltered by a fraction. Who? An investor, I said, and watched surprise flash in her eyes before she could cage it. Someone who knows you very well. She blinked. There was a tiny, almost imperceptible pause where she weighed whether to flee or to fight. Okay, she said finally, her lips stretching into something that wanted to be a grin and missed. Great. The more the merrier. The door opened with a polite knock and a hinge's sigh. Lydia walked in first, quiet, composed, lethal in her calm. Tom followed, scanning the room with a smile he wore like armor. Then he saw us. He saw the wine. He saw Rachel's face tighten. Evening, I said, and my voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded anchored. Rachel turned to me. Her eyes weren't confused anymore. They were calculating. I watched her choose between 1,000 possible lies. Surprise, I added gently. She adjusted her necklace. Tom glanced at Lydia, who pulled out a chair and sat down like she was about to read a carefully prepared statement. No one reached for the wine. Lydia slid a small manila envelope onto the table and pushed it forward with 2 fingers like it weighed more than the whole building. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside, but I did slowly because timing matters. Photos, dates, the receipt that had started this whole thing, copied clean and crisp. And one more thing tucked beneath like a quiet dagger, a printout of messages, his number, her words, the kind of sentences people only write when they think nothing will ever echo. Rachel's voice cracked just a little as she said my name. Babe, she tried, soft as a prayer. This isn't. It was. God, it was. I looked up at her, at both of them, and smiled in a way I hadn't in months. Shall we talk, I said, about networking? The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was a stage, and I was done rehearsing. Rachel's eyes darted from me to Lydia, then to Tom. Tom tried to play it cool, but the color in his face betrayed him. Lydia, on the other hand, looked like a woman who had already buried their relationship in her heart weeks ago. She sat with her back straight, hands folded neatly, and a calmness that was scarier than rage. Rachel was the first to break. Babe, she said, her voice almost pleading, this isn't what it looks like. I laughed, not loud, not mocking, just sharp enough to cut through the lie. Rachel, I've been watching this unfold for months. Every late-night meeting, every text you deleted, every perfume-drenched excuse you thought I wouldn't notice. You want to tell me it's not what it looks like? Go ahead, I'm all ears. She blinked, her lips parting and closing like she was trying to find the right script. It was networking, connections. You don't understand how this industry works. Then explain the hotel garage, Lydia cut in, her voice even. Explain why your so-called mentor kisses you before you walk into a Marriott at midnight. Tom shifted uncomfortably. Lydia, come on, don't do this here. Why not here, she snapped, her composure finally cracking for a second. Why not in the exact kind of room where you two thought you were clever enough to hide? Rachel's face turned red. You hired him, Lydia. Don't pretend you didn't bring him into my life. That stung. It wasn't just guilt. It was deflection, and I saw it for what it was. I leaned forward. Don't you dare blame her. Don't you dare spin this into someone else's fault. You made a choice. Repeatedly. You lied to my face while planning a wedding. Her eyes glossed with tears, the weapon she always reached for when cornered. I love you, she whispered, her hand reaching across the table. I didn't move. You love the thrill. You love being wanted. You love options. But me? No. You don't love me. Because if you did, you wouldn't have put me here. Tom finally spoke, his voice defensive. Look, it wasn't supposed to. This got out of hand. It started as business. It turned into something else, and what? Lydia's voice was ice. And you thought your wife wouldn't notice you sneaking out at night? That you could live 2 lives indefinitely? She pulled her phone out, opened her messages, and read aloud. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. She looked up at Rachel. Recognize your words? Rachel froze. The tears stopped instantly, as if she'd been exposed under a spotlight. She glanced at me, maybe hoping for mercy, but I was done giving her lifelines. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of months of suspicion and sleepless nights crashing down into a single clarity. You know what the worst part is? I said quietly. It's not even the betrayal. It's that you looked me in the eye, wore the ring I gave you, planned a future with me, and all the while you thought I was too stupid to see it. That's what kills me. Her lips trembled. She whispered, please. But mercy is for mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern. I pushed the envelope toward her. Take it. Look at yourself. Every lie, every night, every receipt. That's you. That's your legacy with me. Rachel didn't touch it. Her hand hovered over it like it might burn her. Tom stared at the table, shame creeping into his face, but not enough to apologize. Not to me, not to Lydia. Lydia stood, her chair scraping softly against the floor. She looked down at Tom, her husband, with eyes so calm they cut deeper than fury. We're done, she said. The house, the accounts, the dog, you'll hear from my lawyer. Tom opened his mouth to protest, but she didn't even look at him again. She walked out of that room like a queen leaving her throne, and the silence she left behind was absolute. Rachel reached for me then, her voice desperate. Don't leave me like this. We can fix it. We can start over, please. I stood. My hands were steady, my chest finally light. There is no starting over, not for us. Her face twisted, the pleading turning into anger, into defense. You'll regret this. You'll realize no one else will love you the way I do. I looked at her one last time. You're right. No one else will ever love me the way you did, and thank God for that. I turned, walked out, and didn't look back. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and silence. I moved out of our apartment within a week. Friends tried to reach out, some in shock, some in pity. My parents were devastated, but also relieved when they saw how steady I seemed. The truth is, I wasn't steady. I was shattered. But sometimes survival looks like calm on the outside. Rachel tried to contact me. Calls, texts, emails. At first I ignored them. Then when I couldn't take it anymore, I blocked her on everything. She tried through mutual friends, crying, spinning stories, saying it was all a misunderstanding. But by then, the truth was too loud. Lies don't survive sunlight. I heard through the grapevine that Tom's career took a nosedive. Lydia didn't just divorce him quietly, she made sure his reputation reflected his choices. Clients pulled out, colleagues distanced themselves, and the man who once walked into rooms with a smile now avoided being seen in public. Karma doesn't always work on our timeline, but when it does, it's thorough. And Rachel? She moved to another city a few months later. Someone told me she bounced from job to job, never really settling. I don't wish her harm, but I don't wish her back into my life either. As for me, it took time. Time to trust again. Time to believe that not every laugh at a late-night text meant betrayal. I learned to sit with silence without assuming it was hiding something. I learned that love without honesty is just a performance, and I'd been watching her play a role for too long. One night, months later, I sat in my quiet apartment. No noise except the hum of the fridge. I pulled out the old envelope, looked at the evidence one last time, and then fed it into the shredder. Paper gone, weight gone. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, leaned back, and let the truth settle like dust after a storm. People think betrayal destroys you, but here's the truth. It doesn't. It reveals you. It strips away the lies until all that's left is the raw, unfiltered version of yourself you were too afraid to meet. And I met mine. The last thing I thought before turning out the light was this. Love built on lies isn't love. It's a countdown. And my countdown had finally hit 0. So that was my story, a story where love, betrayal, and truth finally collided. I once thought my life would be simple. Love, marriage, a home. But the truth is, lies never stay buried. They always find their way to the surface. Rachel and Tom thought they could hide behind masks forever, but masks eventually slip. And when they did, everything came crashing down. And me? I learned one lesson that will stay with me forever. Truth doesn't need proof, but betrayal always leaves evidence behind. Remember this. Love built on lies isn't love at all. It's just a countdown. And when the timer hits zero, nothing is left but ashes.